On January 10th, 1983, 40 years ago today, Jim Henson's Fraggle Rock premiered for the first time. Fraggle Rock was long before my time, and I first became introduced to it through Muppet Family Christmas. Then I finally watched Fraggle Rock as a series, and I love it. This fun show revolved around a group of creatures called Fraggles, and the adventures that they get into, sometimes trying to do things that we do as humans, while also trying to stay out of danger from Gorgs and Donks. To celebrate the show's 40th anniversary, I'm going to be looking back on some of my favorite Fraggle Rock episodes. This isn't a countdown and I'm not ranking them, I'm just going to be talking about some that I really like. I actually tried to do this video last year in preparation for the Fraggle Rock reboot, but it just didn't work out. But now I'm going to do it, so let's go into outer space and dance our cares away as I talk to you silly creatures about my favorite Fraggle Rock episodes. And I think I'll start with the first one I ever saw, number 1, Boobers Dream. I was only 7 years old when I watched Fraggle Rock for the first time. I had gotten a DVD with a few episodes on it, and this was one of them. So it starts with the human character, or as the Fraggles call them, silly creatures. It starts with the silly creature Doc telling his dog Sprocket about a dream that he had about a very small furry creature who liked to play all day in a rock. And one of them, in Doc's dream, handed him a pair of red and white striped socks, which Doc actually ends up getting from his neighbor, Mr. Schimmelfinny. Sprocket knows exactly the kind of creature that Doc is talking about because they come into Doc's workshop every day. Fraggles. Meanwhile, in comes Gobo Fraggle to pick up a postcard from his Uncle Traveling Matt. I'm gonna bring that up a few times throughout this retrospective, but just in case you're wondering, let me explain. In the first episode of Fraggle Rock, which is on this list, Gobo's Uncle Matt leaves Fraggle Rock to journey into the human world and writes letters to Gobo detailing what he sees, sending them to Doc's workshop. Because the letters aren't for Doc, he throws them out, so Gobo goes into the workshop to get them from Doc's trash can. But Sprocket always notices, and the beasts, as the Fraggles call him, end up scaring them off. Anyway, so Gobo gets the latest postcard as he and Wembley walk back to the rock. But Wembley already has plans for the day. He's going to help Boober clean his room. And when Wembley gets there, he sees Boober laughing. And if you don't know about Boober, he's known to be pretty negative and worrying all the time. As it turns out, Boober's having a dream. When he wakes up, he tells Wembley that he's been having constant nightmares about a Fraggle named Sidebottom. Boober describes Sidebottom as a big green potato. In other words, Sidebottom is a twin of Boober, but is the opposite of him. Boober and Wembley seek help from the all-knowing Marjorie the Trash Heap. Her suggestion is that the next time Boober dreams of Sidebottom, he should bring Wembley with him. So Boober and Wembley head back to the rock, lie down, and touch their heads as they dream about Sidebottom together. Wembley really likes Sidebottom because of his jokes. Wembley thinks that Sidebottom is in fact Boober, which Boober doesn't really like. As they meet up with the rest of the Fraggles, everyone is playing some kind of freeze tag game. Boober suggests that they do something not fun and do something safe and boring, and have Gobo read them Uncle Matt's postcard. They hate listening to Matt's postcards. According to this one, the silly creatures all share dreams. He's actually at a drive-in movie theater and all the cars turn their lights off so that they can watch the movie. Actually, the movie that they're watching at the drive-in is actually Jim Henson's very own The Dark Crystal. That's when Boober tells the rest of the Fraggles about Sidebottom. Wembley has a lot of fun things to say about Sidebottom, but Boober would rather not talk about him. Gobo, Mokey, and Red really like what they hear from Wembley, and while Boober doesn't really want to, all of the Fraggles lie down, touch their heads together, and find themselves dreaming about Sidebottom's world and engage in his activities. One of them is a freeze tag game, the same one they were playing earlier, but it actually freezes them. Boober is the only one not playing or engaging in Sidebottom in any way. When Boober pins Sidebottom down to the ground, asking him to let everyone go, Boober and Sidebottom make amends and accept each other for who they are. That's when Sidebottom's soul goes into Boober. When the Fraggles wake up, Boober realizes that he actually did get rid of Sidebottom. Number 2, Let the Water Run. Doc is working on his boiler with Sprocket's help because the pipes are constantly banging. That's when Gobo comes in again to get his postcard. When Gobo returns, Red is working on decorating the pool area for her swimming show. Everyone, except Boober of course, pitches in to help, but Red denies it, wanting to do everything on her own. What can I say? She's very confident. Over at the Gorgs garden, Pa Gorg is planning to take a bath, and asks Junior Gorg to get some water from the well for his bath. But the well is connected to the Fraggle pool, and the pipes are connected to Doc's workshop. So when Junior starts pumping, the water in the pool disappears. Wembley says that this happens every day, so the pipe bangers come to bang on the pipes to make water. Well, that explains why Doc can hear them banging. So the pipe bangers make it to Fraggle Rock and do their duty, but this time it doesn't work. And the water in the Gorgs' well is gone too. Red's more upset because of her swim show. Gobo's postcard from Uncle Matt does offer a bit of help for the Fraggles. Matt finds himself in the city when it's starting to rain, so everyone opens their umbrellas. Only problem is, Uncle Matt has no idea what the hell they are doing and doesn't have an umbrella of his own. So one of the silly creatures shares her umbrella with him. He says, "An umbrella is a wonderful object. Not only does it get you wet, but it also keeps you dry." I don't understand why, but Red doesn't believe in umbrellas. But Gobo says that there's an umbrella in the workshop. Red thinks that it might help get more water for the pool, but because of Sprocket, they're all scared to go in. Red's confident that she can make it alone, but she's too scared, so she asks Gobo for help. So Gobo comes in and takes the umbrella. They give the umbrella to the pipe bangers, who use it to do their job. It takes a while, but then Doc fixes the boiler and turns the water on. All of the Fraggles sing this really good song in the hopes that the water runs, and it works! Even the Gorgs' well gets water. Finally, Red does her swimming show, and Doc is able to give Sprocket a bath. But actually takes his own bath, totally leaving Sprocket behind. Number 3, Wembley and the Gorgs. There are 2 plots to this episode, and they aren't really similar, so I'll start with the reason for the title of the episode. Gobo goes to get his letter from Uncle Matt, but Boober, of course, fears for Gobo and offers him his lucky walking stick. Trying to get away from Sprocket, Gobo races out of Doc's workshop and trips over Boober, breaking his lucky walking stick. Gobo offers to go into the Gorgs' garden to get Boober another one, and Wembley goes with him. But Junior notices and captures Wembley. Junior goes to show his parents the Fraggle, but Ma Gorg is disgusted by it. Meanwhile, in comes Pa Gorg, complaining that nobody cares about he and Ma being king and queen of the universe. I don't really understand that, but anyway, Junior offers Wembley to Pa, who would much rather have people praise him. Wembley hears his plea and decides to salute Pa as the king. Upon hearing this, Pa takes the Fraggle from Junior. Meanwhile, down in Fraggle Rock... I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. Anyway, down in Fraggle Rock, Gobo tells Mokey, Boober, and Red what happened to Wembley, and they decide to go and rescue him. Even Boober. But then we'll need 5 memorial stones! So the team makes their way to the Gorgs' garden, all dressed in armor. But Wembley makes an impression on the Gorgs. The Gorgs are pleased that Wembley wants to be a subject for them, and feed him and ask him if he would mind singing for them. So when Ma and Pa Gorg, or the king and queen of the universe, leave to go and get some instruments, Gobo, Mokey, Red, and Boober make it to the Gorgs' garden to help Wembley escape. But Wembley actually wants to stay. As Wembley entertains Ma and Pa, Junior arrives and captures the rest of the Fraggles. Wembley explains to the Gorgs that they're his friends, so they introduce themselves to the Fraggles. But Gobo is too smart for them and stabs Pa in the nose with his sword. Ouch. As punishment, Pa has Junior take them to the tool shed, and Ma takes Wembley into their home as punishment for knowing them. The Fraggles, through a very catchy rock and roll song, try to break out of their cage. But they're stuck. So to take their minds off of their situation, Gobo reads his Uncle Matt's postcard. This one was interesting because this time around, Matt discovers that these creatures who live in the sky that are being held captive on strings. So he cuts them loose. A set of balloons float away, but a kite lands and waits for its master. That doesn't really make anybody feel better. The next morning, the Gorgs consider basically killing the Fraggles, but Wembley wants them to hold a trial. Gobo sees this as an escape trick, but Wembley actually wants to go ahead on the trial. Come on, Wembley, they don't notice! Let them out! They end up going through with the trial, and when asked by the Gorgs if the Fraggles deserve to be thumped, Wembley speaks very positively about his friends. Pa Gorg finds the defendants not guilty, but still would rather keep them to serve Pa as king. That's when Wembley realizes that Gobo knew what he was talking about and bites Pa's nose. And the Fraggles escape the cage and flip-flop skippity-hop back to Fraggle Rock, which is the song that they were using to try to break out of the cage. Meanwhile, Doc gets honored as Man of the Year and is invited to a convention to get his award. Doc arranges for his neighbor and friend Mr. Schimmelfinny to dog sit. Sprocket doesn't want Mr. Schimmelfinny to dog sit. Why? Doc says Mr. Schimmelfinny does not look like that. He's a nice man, and he's bringing his cat Fluffinella. Yeah, Fluffinella and Sprocket don't become fast friends. At the end of the episode, Doc comes back with his Man of the Year award and an award for Sprocket, Dog of the Year. Number 4, Wembleys Egg. Wembley's a little bit sad because all of the other Fraggles are doing something. Boober offers to help him and looks through a book on emotions, where he discovers that Wembley has symptoms of someone whose life has no meaning. Up in the Gorgs' garden, Junior also feels bored, until he finds an egg up in a nest in a tree above him and decides to get the egg down for his father's dinner. But as he shakes the tree to try to get the egg down, the egg falls into the Fraggle pool in the middle of Red's swimming class. 2 birds fly to the nest and notice that the egg is missing. Junior explains what happened, and the birds are not happy, and all of the Fraggles are now panicking over this mysterious object, but Wembley knows what it is. Usually Gobo's the smart one, but anyway, the tree creatures sit on it, and after a while, a baby pops out of it. It's a house for babies! The other Fraggles think that Wembley is full of shit, but Wembley doesn't listen to any of that. When the Fraggles get the egg out of the pool, Wembley sits on it himself. The next morning, a baby tree creature pops out. But nobody is really accepting of Wembley's monster. He destroys everything in Boober's kitchen, eats everything in it, he doesn't really like anything that he's being fed, and knocks Red into the pool during her swim class. Mokey is a bit gentle with the baby and feeds it seeds, which it likes, but the baby feels kind of miserable in Fraggle Rock. Gobo, or Boo-Boo as the baby calls him, tries to cheer it up by reading his latest message from Uncle Matt. This time around, Matt finds more flying creatures, really airplanes. That's when the baby finds flying interesting and wants to learn how. So Mama Wembley decides to teach his baby how to fly. For the record, Fraggles can't fly. But everyone pitches in to teach Wembley's baby how to fly through song. But that doesn't work. So Wembley starts to doubt whether or not he's a great mother to the baby. That's when Wembley discovers that the birds in the Gorgs' garden want their baby back. So Wembley decides to try to reunite the baby with his parents. But how? Over in Doc's workshop, it's Sprocket's birthday, and Doc buys himself a book, and is so focused on reading it that he totally forgets about Sprocket's birthday. Gobo comes into the workshop and takes a few balloons from the workshop. Clearly they won't miss them. So the Fraggles put together a little device to fly the baby back up to the Gorgs' garden, where the birds finally meet their baby. After Doc finishes reading the book, he realizes that it's Sprocket's birthday and decides to start the party. Sprocket points to his present, but the book is on top of it, so Doc just assumes that Sprocket likes the book. I actually have a book version of this episode. My friend found it in her basement and gave it to me. So thank you to my friend for that. This is the episode that book was based on. Number 5, I Want to Be You. This one was a good episode about friendships. Mokey is writing poems while Red and Gobo practice slides. When Mokey is struggling to think of rhymes for her poem, Gobo decides to help. Finally, she finishes the poem, and Boober, Wembley, and Gobo go to listen. Gobo says, "Saved by the poem," while Red is showing him how to do slides. Clearly, Gobo didn't want to do it. Red gets a little upset that everyone seems to be paying more attention to Mokey, so she seeks advice from the trash heap. When Red talks about her problem to her, the trash heap starts coming up with poems herself. Feeling ignored, Red goes back to Fraggle Rock and makes herself look like Mokey, even impersonating her voice. Even the doozers see a problem with this. Red starts acting like Mokey does, but ends up making a mess in the process. Boober comes in with a book on diseases, and seeing how Red looks, he thinks that she might have one. Red, looking like Mokey, meets up with Mokey, and they sing a song about a beetle that goes faster and faster every time. Red is able to keep up with Mokey, but the faster it gets, the harder it gets. Gobo joins in when the song gets slower, and afterwards, Mokey notices that something's wrong with Red. Boober tries to find a cure for whatever disease Red has, but Gobo realizes that Red is trying to be Mokey. Gobo and Mokey think that maybe the trash heap is responsible for this, so they sneak past Junior Gorg to make their way to the trash heap. When they arrive, they discover that the trash heap and her assistants Philo and Gunge are praising Mokey's poem. They go back to the rock to talk to Red about it, but get caught by Junior on the way. Red finds them and sneaks behind a bush before she gets captured by Junior too. She talks through the bush to distract Junior and orders him to close his eyes. This is the perfect time for Gobo and Mokey to break free, and Junior closes his eyes. Red says, "Dark, isn't it?" That joke gets used a few times in this episode, so Red orders Junior to run, but he runs with his eyes closed and falls. When he opens his eyes, he sees that the Fraggles are escaping. That's when Red admits that she was trying to be like Mokey and admits that she makes a crummy version of her. But Gobo says that she makes a great bush. Very similarly, Doc and Sprocket get invited to a costume party and try to figure out what costume they're going to wear. The one they end up doing is Doc as Sprocket and Sprocket as Doc. Number 6, Beginnings. This was the very first episode of Fraggle Rock. I could have started with this one, but I kind of chose them all randomly. I just thought of a few episodes that I really liked, so let's get started with this one. Doc and Sprocket move into their workshop, while Uncle Matt is exploring the caves of Fraggle Rock. On his journey, he discovers an opening to what he calls outer space, which is really just a hole in Doc's workshop's wall. And Matt decides to explore outer space on his own, writing down the details of his journeys in the form of postcards and have them delivered to Doc's workshop, asking Gobo to pick them up. When Uncle Matt gets scared off by Sprocket, Gobo worries about having to go into the workshop if Sprocket's going to be there. As Matt continues journeying through outer space, he gets scared off by a car in the road, a fire hydrant, and a baseball team, which he describes as an army carrying dangerous weapons. Honestly, he's not wrong. Gobo worries about Uncle Matt and doesn't want to talk to the other Fraggles about it, so Gobo decides to go to the trash heap for help. After escaping Junior Gorg, the trash heap says that she knows that Gobo has troubles. After singing a rock and roll song about troubles, Gobo explains that he's nervous to go and get Uncle Matt's postcards because of Sprocket, but the trash heap helps him realize that Gobo made it past the Gorgs in one piece. But Gobo feels alone in this situation, so the trash heap's advice is that Gobo get some friends to go with him. So the rest of the Fraggles join Gobo on his first journey to pick up Uncle Matt's card. Shortly before they arrive, Doc keeps working away on putting the workshop together while Sprocket feels lonely. So to keep Sprocket occupied, he throws him a ball. But Sprocket doesn't really want to play with it alone, so it rolls into Fraggle Rock. The Fraggles notice this and refer to it as a hideous round thing. And when Sprocket corners Gobo, they throw it back into the workshop. That's when Sprocket starts to become occupied with it as Gobo escapes. It's really funny when Doc sees Matt's postcard in his mail and reads it as being for Gobo Fraggle. He says, "Why would mail to Gobo Fraggle be coming here?" So he throws it into the wastebasket, and that's where Doc always throws them so that Gobo can get them there. Other episodes even have Doc questioning why they're getting mail for someone named Gobo Fraggle. I wonder if they think maybe somebody lived there previously whose name is Gobo Fraggle. But anyway, let's continue with number 7, Red's Blue Dragon. After Gobo gets his postcard from Uncle Matt, he gets the crap scared out of him by Red, who is wandering the caves of Fraggle Rock, playing the part of her favorite fictional character, Princess Gwenalot. Red compares the stories of Princess Gwenalot to Uncle Matt's postcards, which none of the other Fraggles care about, and they think that Uncle Matt is full of shit. Uncle Matt is actually coming home from outer space. Red hasn't seen him, and since the opening to Doc's workshop is how he got into outer space, he figures that's where he's coming in. But since Red hasn't seen him, Gobo tries the other entrance. There's another entrance to the human world in Fraggle Rock? Also, do the Gorgs live in the same world as the humans do? Red keeps acting out her Princess Gwenalot story as Uncle Matt makes it back to Fraggle Rock and Red frightens him. Red says to Uncle Matt, "I bet any Fraggle could make it in outer space." So Uncle Matt challenges Red to put her money where her mouth is and double dares Red to go into the human world. In outer space, Doc and Sprocket get invited to another costume party, and Sprocket is trying to figure out what animal he should go as. Red starts her way into the workshop and leaves when she gets frightened by Sprocket trying to impersonate a wolf for the party. So, upon realizing that he was right, Matt decides to start looking for Gobo. Red tells him he went to the other entrance, and then she asks where it is. According to Uncle Matt, there are many entrances to outer space in Fraggle Rock, and all of them are in another room. Red follows Matt to what's called the T. Matthew Fraggle Room, which Matt personally named and discovered. Red is fascinated by it. It's like a bunch of caves, and Uncle Matt touches one of them and this portal sucks him into another world. Red thinks it's so cool, but Uncle Matt advises Red to not touch the caves. After Uncle Matt leaves, She accidentally does, and the world she goes into is nothing like the world that Uncle Matt describes. But only one thing is similar to how Uncle Matt described the human world. A monster. This monster wasn't Sprocket though, it was a blue dragon. Just like in her story of Princess Gwenelot and the Blue Dragon. But even so, it frightens Red right away, so she escapes the cave. She wants to show this cave to the rest of the Fraggles and plans to use her amulet to mark the cave. Matt and Gobo follow her back to the caves as Red goes back into the one she discovered. When Matt and Gobo make it, they realize that all the caves look alike, and they have a hard time figuring out which one exactly Red could be in. While in her cave, she reunites with the dragon. Matt, on the other hand, finds himself in a library. He asks the librarian for help. He says, "A friend of mine has been telling me a story about a blue dragon. Do you know where I could find it?" He's actually asking where the dragon is, but being in a library, the librarian gives him a copy of the Princess Gwenelot story about a blue dragon. Close enough. Gobo works up the courage to follow after Matt, but because the caves are all pretty much the same on the outside, Gobo finds himself in Doc's backyard where he tries to hide from Sprocket. Upon returning home from outer space, Gobo reunites with Matt, who returns from his adventure too, but they still can't find Red. As they take off, Red tries to bring the dragon back to Fraggle Rock with her, and while trying to get away, both of them escape the caves, but the dragon gets loose. When Red catches up to the dragon, he turns out to be afraid of Red rather than the other way around. As the dragon gets nervous around Fraggle Rock, she plans to show him to Uncle Matt to make him believe that she was in outer space. Why should he believe her though? She doesn't believe him. As Matt continues looking for Red, he finds her amulet on the ground of the caves and tries to set it down, but touches the cave that the dragon was in and finds himself in that world. As he leaves, the dragon arrives to the caves and can't find his own. So he touches a random one leading to Doc's backyard, where Sprocket is now trying to pull off a costume of an elephant. The dragon then gets loose in the human world, and when Doc notices, he thinks that it's Mr. Schimmelfinny's Cat Fluffanella's costume. While Matt's in the dragon's world, he realizes that while it is very much like how Red described it, it's more peaceful. That's because the dragon isn't around. Eventually we see Red warning Gobo that a dragon is on the loose somewhere. Little do they know where exactly, but Gobo brushes it off. On the hunt for Uncle Matt, Gobo and Red head back to the caves where the dragon returns and bumps into Red. Red tries to convince the dragon to stay so she can show Uncle Matt. She promises to return the dragon home, having marked the cave with her amulet, which the dragon is relieved to hear and goes back home. At last, Gobo and Matt reunite with Red, and they still think Red is nuts. Red offers to take them to the dragon's cave herself, but when Uncle Matt picks up the amulet and gives it to Red, they're kind of in a trap. Number 8, the minstrels. It's a quiet day for both the Fraggles and for Doc and Sprocket. Sprocket gets woken up to the sound of Doc trying to install a new doorbell out of pots, pans, cans, bowls, and even Sprocket's dog food can, much to Sprocket's dismay. Doc thinks it's a dignified way of going to the door instead of knocking. But honestly, it's even louder. Sprocket tests it out while Doc looks for more tools, but forgot to unlock the door so Sprocket can get in. Poor dog. Doc does end up realizing that Sprocket is locked out, and how he finds out is he heard Sprocket knocking. So Doc opens the door and says, "Why didn't you ring the doorbell?" Down in Fraggle Rock, everyone is just waking up as music starts playing. All of the Fraggles listen to it as a group of creatures called the minstrels arrive, playing the music live for the Fraggles. This group of artists was led by Cantus, one of the only 2 recurring characters on Fraggle Rock, performed by Jim Henson. The song that Cantus performs with the minstrels as they arrive in Fraggle Rock is actually my very favorite song from the show, Let Me Be Your Song. I even said it to Steve Whitmire that Jim had a nice singing voice with songs like Rainbow Connection, I Don't Want to Live on the Moon, and of course, this one. Cantus introduces himself and the minstrels to the Fraggles. He explains that they wander the Fraggle caves regularly and have Fraggles join them to sing a medley. Red at first thinks that he means a race, and strongly believes that she would come in first. While that isn't exactly what Cantus means, he says that one Fraggle must be the first to sing a medley and chooses Red to lead. Cantus believes that every Fraggle has a song, and that Red should find it inside of her. He gives all the Fraggles a day to find their song. Red starts her journey, but isn't sure where to look for her song. Wembley and Gobo all find their songs just by listening to the sounds inside their heads. But Mokey is also struggling to find her song. While Red hasn't figured out a song at all, Mokey's found 4 and can't decide which one really speaks to her. Red turns to Cantus for advice, but tells him that it's her friend who can't find her song. Cantus's advice is that she must look deep inside the outside and listen, but Red doesn't understand. As Red keeps searching, Cantus conducts a little experiment. His pipe is magic, and it knows what songs to do. It even plays a song for the Doozers. The Doozers say, "They're playing our song," as they continue their work. Wembley asks Cantus if the pipe knows his song, and sure enough, it does. It even works for Gobo. They just blow into the pipe very softly, and right away, it knows the song. But when Red asks if she can give it a try, Cantus says, "A song must never be played in order for it to be heard." What the hell? Anyway, Cantus goes away as Red decides that she needs the pipe, so she has Mokey come with her to borrow the pipe. But she didn't tell Cantus, so it's kind of stealing. Mokey tries to stop Red from stealing the pipe, but Red doesn't listen. When she comes to where the minstrels are sleeping, she has Mokey guard the area and Red gets the pipe. When she blows into it, all it does is just make the sound from Red's breath that she blew into it. After that, it plays music as it carries Red over to the Gorgs' garden. Junior wakes up in the middle of the night, love the radish PJs, and hears the music from the pipe. As it drags Red through the garden, followed by Mokey, Junior spots them and tries to thump them so he can see them dance. Not very much different from what happened when Wembley was subject to the Gorgs. Cantus can hear the pipe coming from the garden and wakes up to say, "Be still, pipe." That's when all of a sudden the music stops as Mokey and Red get away from Junior, but the pipe disappears out of Red's hand, which now has some kind of glow on it. Now all of the Fraggles head over to the rock to meet with Cantus for the medley, and Red has to get there to start it. She lies to Gobo and Wembley that she has laryngitis, but they think she's just nervous. To hide the glow, Red puts her hand in Mokey's pocket. That's lucky that Mokey's shirt has pockets. But Cantus is missing the pipe, so he can't do the medley. But he can tell who is responsible, because whoever took it will have the glow on their hand. While trying to figure it out, Mokey admits that she does know something about it. Wow, she nearly 5-0's Red. Anyway, Red fesses up by showing the glow on her hand, but Cantus already can tell because Red was the only one who didn't know her song. Red goes back to the Gorgs' garden with Cantus to retrieve the pipe. Cantus tells Red that she should go and get it herself, and Red is nervous to go past Junior. Junior notices Red and tries to capture her, but to distract him, Cantus tells the pipe to play Gorg music. The music distracts Junior, and Red grabs the pipe. The sound of the pipe is heard at the rock, as Cantus and Red return with it. With the pipe back, Cantus has Red lead the medley with her song, which she doesn't have because she thinks it's in the pipe. Cantus tells her that her song is actually in her. Red still can't find her song, and Cantus tells her to listen. Finally, Red hears something, and with her hand now not glowing, she begins to sing. And the rest of the Fraggles and minstrels join in. Even Boober finds himself enjoying listening to it. Number 9. The precification of convincing John. Both Doc and Mokey have started their own diaries. Mokey's diary details the events of the episode. One day, while Mokey is watching the Doozers do some construction work around Fraggle Rock, she notices that the Fraggles are more interested in eating Doozer towers than leaving them up. Mokey thinks to herself that the Doozers work really hard on their construction, and tries to persuade the rest of the Fraggles to stop eating them. But the other Fraggles love eating Doozer construction and have a hard time stopping. So Mokey takes it up with a Fraggle named Convincing John, a Fraggle who can convince anyone to do anything. Convincing John was Jim Henson's other character on the show, and with the help of his singing group, the Fragglettes, he, in song, convinces the Fraggles to stop eating Doozer construction. According to the latest postcard from Uncle Matt, there are even Doozers in the human world too. Believe me, I know all about human Doozers. My dad is one of them. Seeing the human Doozers, Uncle Matt gets hungry and decides to sneak around their building site to get a snack. But it tastes awful. I've been on construction sites before, and honestly, they have better snacks than what they're building. In the Fraggle world, their Doozers continue working hard on their construction, and it ends up filling almost the entire rock. The Fraggles blame Mokey for this and demand that she changes her mind. But she refuses because she appreciates how hard the Doozers work. But it becomes too much for the Doozers, and because the Fraggles aren't eating their construction, they have nowhere else to put it, so they must leave Fraggle Rock. That's when Mokey admits that she was wrong and brings Convincing John back to talk the Fraggles into eating doozer construction again. When the Fraggles go back to eating, the doozers return to the rock. Number 10. The Trial of Cotterpin Doozer. Another one about the doozers. One of the doozers named Cotterpin, assistant to Architect Doozer, is caught by a doozer named Tumbrel for interacting with Red. Oh, by the way, Tumbrel is performed by our friend Gord Robertson. Anyway, so Tumbrel is jealous that Cotterpin is the architect's assistant, and is angry that Cotterpin is sharing their construction plans with a Fraggle. Why does he care so much? The Fraggles are probably just gonna eat it. Mokey calls all of the Fraggles to the rock to let everyone know that she discovered a poison cackler's egg in a nest in the cavern, which makes all the Fraggles worry. But Gobo knows that after the eggs hatch after a few days, the babies leave. So Gobo has the idea to leave their cave for a few days until the cacklers leave. All of the Fraggles follow Gobo's idea. Down at the Doozer Dome, Cotterpin returns from work and is arrested by Tumbrel and sent to Doozer Court on trial for making friends with Fraggles. Also, I should point out that the bailiff Doozer is played by another friend, and also the first guest to ever come on Nostalgia Talk, Mike Peterson. I have a copy of a Fraggle Rock DVD that has this episode on it, and when I took his puppeteering class, he signed it for me. Anyway, yeah, it's apparently illegal for doozers to interact with Fraggles, and immediately Cotterpin is convicted and is sentenced by the judge to no longer being the architect's apprentice. In other words, the judge fired her. Cotterpin doesn't really understand what's wrong with being friends with Fraggles. I don't either. But according to Tumbrel, doozers are only allowed to be friends with noble and intelligent creatures. Tumbrel is pretty judgmental. Anyway, according to the bailiff, if Cotterpin can prove that it's a stupid rule, then it can be changed. Tumbrel decides to keep that from happening, but the judge gives Cotterpin a chance to prove her point. But she doesn't have much time, and all of the Fraggles took off. Except for two. The very dim-witted Large Marvin and Feeny Fraggle. Cotterpin finds them while looking for Fraggles and asks them to follow her. So the good news is that she found some Fraggles. But the bad news is that they're both stupid. So much so that Feeny thinks that Cotterpin is a Gorg. This is where Large Marvin is a bit smarter. He knows that Gorgs are giant. Cotterpin is much smaller than a Gorg or a Fraggle. Cotterpin explains her case to the Fraggles and asks them to help, asking them to be noble and intelligent. Yeah, you're kind of in a trap, Cotterpin. Nevertheless, she gives them tips on what to tell the judge, but they get their words mixed up. Cotterpin asks them what's the best thing you can say about Fraggles. They think about it, and Feeny says, "We ain't spiders!" Cotterpin leaves Marvin and Feeny to the Doozer Dome for the trial, but while on the way, Feeny notices an egg cracking and asks Marvin, "Does this egg remind you of something we forgot?" But he brushes it off and heads to the Doozer Dome. But when Cotterpin makes it there, she realizes that Marvin and Feeny won't fit through the tunnel. Cotterpin attempts to get the judge so she can see the Fraggles herself, but Marvin and Feeny believe that they might be able to fit through the tunnel. Feeny suggests that they listen to Cotterpin and wait for her, but Marvin has the idea of going through backwards. Cotterpin has rounded up the judge, the bailiff, and Tumbrel so that they can meet the Fraggles, but Marvin has already started coming in backwards, and Tumbrel thinks he isn't noble. He isn't wrong. Marvin is stuck in the tunnel, and even when Feeny tries to push him through, it doesn't work. Marvin's rear is blocking the doozer's way through the tunnel, and so to get him out of the way, the bailiff uses his feather on his stick to tickle Marvin's feet. But it doesn't move him, and Marvin only laughs. Cotterpin still wants everyone to see what she really thinks of Fraggles, so she suggests going out the back way. This works, and they find Feeny and Marvin, who is still stuck in the tunnel. Bailiff swears the Fraggles in, and the judge asks them her questions. But of course, Feeny gets his word mixed up. "In the circus we're standing in, we'll be pleased to discuss the topic of underpants." That doesn't really help Cotterpin's case, and the conviction stands. Tumbrel is pleased with this, but Feeny and Marvin feel guilty. At that very moment, the poison cackler egg hatches. Feeny suggests that he and Marvin get out of the way, but Marvin's still stuck. The cackler grabs Cotterpin, and Feeny tries to save her, but the cackler grabs Feeny. Finally, Marvin manages to get out of the tunnel and slides out so fast that he hits the baby poison cackler. He also drops his bag of snacks, which get eaten by the cackler. Feeny suggests that Marvin give him the rest of the snacks to get rid of the cackler. The judge calls this plan intelligent and calls Marvin noble for giving up his snacks so that the baby poison cackler will let Cotterpin go. Tumbrel goes, "Oh, rats!" After the cackler leaves with Marvin's snacks, the judge overturns the conviction and realizes that Fraggles in fact are noble and intelligent, allowing Fraggles and Doozers to be friends. Suck it, Tumbrel! Alright, so that's it. 40 years and 10 episodes of Fraggle Rock. All episodes of Fraggle Rock are streaming on Apple TV+, and you can also check out the reboot, Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock, on the same network. I really liked it. Actually, I do have a funny story for you. The day that it came out, my friends were all betting on each other as to how long it would take me to watch the whole season. A lot of them figured I would be done by the night, but I thought I would be finished by the end of the weekend. And my friends won the bet. They're doing a second season now, so let's see if I finish that in one day too. And for all of you silly creatures out there listening, if you have a favorite episode of Fraggle Rock, whether I talked about it in this retrospective or not, let me know in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about it, and I will see you soon. Peace!